white contractors coming to the ghetto and building. And kind of the same thing that you hear about in New York, with the mob extorting the contractors and stuff. So that's what my father did for a living. He extorted the truckers and everybody that anything to do with construction, he extorted them.
Incredible.
Yeah. And he would go into meetings and people would say, "Hey, James, you ain't got no business here. You don't have," and he always carried a bag, a leather bag, like what we call them today, pouches. And he would go in that bag and pull that gun out and put it on the table. This is all the credentials I need. Wow. And they were shaking in their boots and the contractors would pay him.
Wow.
And ultimately, he had a friend named Morris Phillips that was head of redevelopment. And redevelopment was an agency that was over most of the urban housing and building. So, he would tell him, "Hey, this guy just got a contract up here." That was his prey.
I'm going to go see him then.
Yeah, he'd go see him, shake him up. He'd pay him.
Imagine how cutting edge that was. That for the gall of a black man in the 60s to go extort Italian mafia style, go extort white developers.
Yes, this was in the 70s.
70s.
Early 70s.
That's very audacious.
Yes. So he went to federal prison. He went to federal prison for a trucker by the name of Chet Smith, dimed him out. And told the feds on him, and they indicted him and Morris Phillips, and they went to federal prison. So while he was in federal prison, you can meet anybody that you want to meet. So if you want to learn how to rob banks, you can hang with the bank robbers. You want to sell dope, you go hang with the dope dealers. You want to go.
What up, everybody? This is Dregs1. Welcome to another episode of the History of the Bay podcast, recorded right here at Empire Studios in San Francisco. And today, we got a very special guest. This is somebody who's not necessarily in the world of hip-hop, in the world of graffiti, in the world of the arts, but he is a San Francisco legend nonetheless. This is somebody I heard about growing up in San Francisco for many years. His entire family, very notorious. And I like to use this platform not to glorify certain situations on the street, but to educate people about them so that we can learn from them. And undeniably, it is part of our culture, our history here in the Bay Area. And this person has played a major role in shaping that history. He is known as basically the boss of San Francisco. This is all documented, and his story goes back many decades, just like the title of his book, Deep Rooted. I'm talking with the one and only James Beasley.
How you doing? Thanks for having me, Driggs.
Of course, brother. Thanks for agreeing to do this.
I don't take every opportunity that's given to me to speak, but I will say that you came very highly recommended. I mean, this is the show that I think you should do.
I appreciate it.
When that came from Herm Lewis, my brother and Black Sea.
Right on.
Okay.
Shout out to Herm. Shout out to Black Sea, the whole RBO family. Hunters Point royalty.
That's right.
And
Bayview Hunters Point.
Bayview Hunters Point. Yeah. Let's get that correct. Real San Francisco roots here. And I think growing up in Frisco, your name, you're not surprised, I'm sure, to hear that. For me as a young kid, your name was ringing, right?
Yes.
Your family's name,
yes,
was ringing, and I think one reason it's important to talk to you is because San Francisco has this postcard image of cable cars and cafes and bridges and beaches and tourism, but we know there's a whole nother side of San Francisco.
There's a dark side.
Right.
Let's get to it. Let's get to it, man. It's the dark side of it,
Yeah. Yeah, this it's the good, the bad, and the ugly, and there's a reality in communities like Bayview, Hunters Point, Sunnydale, Lakeview, Fillmore that the rest of the world really doesn't know about.
Right.
Well, you describe yourself as a third generation criminal.
Yes.
Explain your grandparents and your parents' background.
My grandparents were, one side of my grandparents were Christians, Baptists. We still own and operate the church, Greater New Life Baptist Church on Paloux, 1135 Paloux. And my roots were there, being reared in that home under my grandfather, Reverend Willie Jackson, my mother's father. And then on the other side is the Beasleys. My grandfather was a shipyard worker. And they didn't get none. They were square. They didn't break any law, but it was more like my great uncle, Carl Newt, was the first generation who went to McNeil Island Federal Prison for selling heroin. Then the next generation was my dad, James Beasley Sr., Willie Beasley Sr., Charles Tatum Sr., John Wade Sr., that's the second generation. The third generation is me, James Beasley, Maurice Tatum, Willie Beasley Jr., Charles Tatum Jr., we're the third generation.
Got it. Yeah, it's kind of interesting how your story unfolds because it's all family trees, right?
Yes.
So you mentioned your great uncle, Charles Newt.
No, Carl Newt.
Carl Newt, sorry.
Was my great uncle.
And that's...
He went to McNeil Island for selling heroin in probably the 50s or the 40s.
Right. And that's Ron Newt's...
Uncle. It's Ron Newt's uncle.
So Ron Newt, another legendary San Francisco fixture who's passed on.
Yes.
But he's a big part of your story as well.
He's a big part of my life.
Yeah. Were there any other notorious families in the community around that time?
I would have to say, Herm Lewis comes from a notorious family, the Lewis brothers. Herm had some notorious brothers, which were third generation like me. Rodney Lewis, rest in peace. Daryl Lewis, rest in peace. Then, we had the Branners, that ran the Army Street, projects,
Yeah, I'm not gonna name drop too much, but like I said, when I hear some of these names, I'm like, well, I went to high school with such and such.
Yes,
I went to middle school with such and such. So there's different generations of again deep rooted here in the San Francisco community. What I thought was interesting as I was reading your book, which of course we'll put the link in the description. Make sure you order that. As I was reading your book, one thing that was really interesting is that you described Bayview Hunters Point as more of a middle-class neighborhood in the 60s and 70s. What was it like when you were growing up there?
When I grew up in Bayview Hunters Point, it was, like I said, my grandparents were hardworking people who worked on the shipyard. Probably we would call it probably today is longshoremen's. It's the same type of work. And it was a lot of, on my block has been renamed, like the youngsters call it, the H block. So which is Hollister, Ingerson, and Gilman, and Jamestown. Those four streets, even today, that everybody that grew up on those streets, we linked in. We linked in real tough with each other, but they just call it the H block because it was a bigger block than all the rest of the streets that I named. And me growing up on Ingerson, what I saw was a lot of pimps players, hustlers, and hoes. That's what I grew up seeing. I didn't grow up idolizing Michael Jackson or Teddy Pendergrass's R&B singers. I didn't grow up idolizing Willie Mays, Barry Bonds. I grew up idolizing pimps and players because that's what I saw. I saw at any given time, I could easily see a Rolls Royce driving up and down Ingerson. I could see a Pantera, I could see a Cadillac, all different sorts of expensive cars that we would see up and down the street because on that street we had our own little village, own little family, and that's what we bred: pimps, hoes, and dope dealers.
Well, I believe you described your own upbringing as more middle class, and was that a lifestyle that was afforded by pimping and hustling?
My mom raised me as a single parent.
Okay.
And my mom started.
Well, it's interesting, like, to go through the history, right? Like, we talk about your great uncle selling heroin in the 50s, right? And then your father and his girlfriend getting into heroin as well. But in the 70s and if you know U.S. history, right, that's when cocaine was really introduced on a street level in America. How did cocaine change things?
I think, I think cocaine was always considered a rich man's high. Black people couldn't afford it until the 70s. And I want to say that, my family, Ron Newt, Charles Tatum Sr. were on the cutting edge of that, bringing that cocaine to San Francisco as a whole, not just Bayview, Hunters Point, but San Francisco at a affordable price.
So it's like, it was a party drug at first, right?
I would think so.
Yeah. So as that got introduced, that kind of became popular, and that opened up a new revenue source.
It was, guys would have spoons around their neck, and they would, snort. It was a party drug.
Right. It was kind of like openly acceptable.
Yeah, it was over. You started cocaine, you was a player. You were socially accepted,
right?
And because it was a rich man's high.
So it was like a status.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the 70s, some guy, I don't know who it was, but some guy came up with a harebrained scheme to take cocaine and mix it with ether.
Right.
And cook it in what was called cocaine base.
Yep.
Freebase, which destroyed a lot of people, man. Freebase destroyed the community, destroyed a lot of good people, man. Which now, today, they call it crack.
Right. Which we'll get to as well, because that's an important part of this history. Like I said, man, we're not here to glorify this stuff, but we got to understand what actually happened, right?
We're here today, and I hope that you accept my book and respect my book as my testimony. This is my testimony. It's more than my story, it's my testimony. Please respect it as just that. It's not about glorifying the game, it's more of education, because it's something that's not talked about. If it's not me, if it's not Herm, who can educate you to this?
Yeah.
There's only a few of us that can educate you to this. So don't condemn me for me wanting to educate you so you don't repeat what I did. Spend 27 years in a federal prison.
Very well said. Well, to go back to your book, a big part of the story is the A-Team.
Okay.
So who was the A-Team?
The A-Team consists of my cousin Charles Tatum Jr., and my cousin Maurice Goldie Tatum, one of my mentors. It started with them. I give them credit because they were the third generation to bring cocaine to 3rd Street at an affordable price. You know, they brought it, they introduced it to the massive, which is the 3rd generation, us, who made it affordable to us. You know, they were definitely on the cutting edge of it. And they formed the A-Team. When my cousin Ricky, the Tatums are related to me on my father's side. My cousin Ricky Page is related to me on my mother's side. So when Ricky told me about Pampers and Milk, and I reached to Goldie for help, man, look, I got to come up, you know. So Goldie, you know, hey, man, here, you know, this is what I got. Let me share with you what I got. He showed me how to read the scale, how to cut it, this and that. Boom, where I got my start at. What I quickly found out, I thought he did help me, but it was more of a competition. And I didn't understand why, because I was a branch from his tree, you know. And at that time, I decided, once I found that out through one of his runners, I said, well, I got to plant my own seeds. I got to grow my own tree. I got to grow my own branches. And I got to produce my own leaves. So that's what I did, you know. So it became somewhat of a rival. But when you think of rival, you don't think of family, you don't think of peacefulness, you think of violence. But we're family, so it was never that. It's just that, you know, he was a boss. He was a boss already, and I was up and coming boss. I wasn't going to be a sergeant. I wanted to be a general.
Right.
So I wasn't going to fall in line to it. So that's probably what's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, when you talk about it in the book, I got more of the sense of like business competition.
Most definitely.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like two different corporations.
Two different companies.
Going after the market share.
Two different, exactly.
Yeah. And, you know, as I'm talking to you, and like I said in your book, it's like, man, you're very business-minded, bro. And also pretty ruthless as in some of the things you describe. Where did that mentality come from?
I think a lot of it became from my dad. I want to cross the bridge, a 22-mile bridge, and partnered up with a guy. You know who that guy is?
Yes, I believe I do. I did my homework. I was going to get to this, but I believe you're talking about Daryl Reed, correct?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
I want to cross the bridge and partnered up with him, which was unheard of. All the people in the world, why would you go across the bridge and partner with a dude from Oakland? Why? Because I felt he and I had the same ideology. He was younger than me. I was the youngest guy on my side of the bridge. All my contemporaries and family and friends, I'm the youngest person on the B team.
Mm.
So I want to cross the bridge to partner up with him. Because a lot of people's not going to give either one of us this credit. But guys from San Francisco was not allowed in Oakland.
Yeah, there's been some tension between
between the two cities.
Yeah.
Guys from Oakland wasn't allowed to San Francisco. They couldn't go past the Palladium. Even in the Palladium, it would be some shit. So I wanted to bring peace amongst the two cities. That's why I partnered up with him to bring peace, because he was doing the same thing that I was doing in the city. He was doing in Oakland. So I said, you know what, this thing could be much bigger and better for everybody if I partnered up with him. And it worked.
Yeah, I mean, that's Lil D's operation is like pretty famous. And again, I think you're right. Like, it's basically two CEOs.
Yes.
It's damn near two CEOs entering into a corporate partnership. It's like Time Warner.
Correct.
Damn near like, so it's really interesting, man. Like it sounds like you were really that dude on the head of the pyramid that was laying down the infrastructure to turn this from like a, nickel and dime corner operation into an actual business, multi-million-dollar business.
Yes, I like to say that had it not been for either one of us getting arrested, we both could have been a Jay-Z, Dr. Dre, P. Diddy without the scandal that's going on right now.
No Diddy.
We could have easily been
a mogul,
because it's a lot of songs and rappers that respect us enough to keep us relevant and mention us in their songs. And those people would have easily signed with us.
Right. Another interesting connection, Ron Newt, his sons, the Neutrons. He was basically trying to get them off the ground on Jackson 5 style. You ended up meeting Michael Jackson through Ron
Through
Newt?
Ron.
Yeah. How did that happen?
Well, Ron had moved from San Francisco to L.A. He thought, being in L.A. could better serve the kids. And he met Michael, and, Michael had the monkey and so forth, and Bubbles.
Bubbles the chimpanzee.
Yeah, so, we were over at the house one day, and Michael told Ron that Bubbles could fight. And, and Bubbles tried to swing on Ronnie. And Ronnie, Ronnie could really fight. And Bubbles and Ronnie was like really like having a fight.
That's crazy. That's wild.
But it ultimately led us to being invited to the Grammys. Michael gave Ron some tickets, and Ron and I and a couple other guys went to the Grammys with Ron.
Yeah, so you actually, there's a few points in time where you are getting close in the music industry and you're making some inroads there.
We were getting close. We were, had I not gone to jail, I could have probably better served Ron, with the kids, And they told Ron to wait, slow down. Ron, anybody know Ron? Ron wants to go now. And Ron had one speed, fast, and they told him they wanted to wait. Ron, gave Ron the money, and, Ron had given me, most of my money back that I invested with the kids, and, and he was ready to go on his own, but the record label is telling him to wait because they had New Edition, and they wanted to milk that with New Edition, and then bring on the Neutrons after. And Ronnie was like, "Nah, I want my kids broke now." That's the term in the record business.
Right.
Break a group. And Ron wanted to be broke now, and they didn't want to do it.
Well, the Neutrons, Jay Valentine.
Shout out to Jay.
Yeah. Yeah, he landed all right for himself.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
Well, you mentioned that you went to prison, right? And your case is really interesting. You were investing in a lot of legal businesses as you were going, right?
Yes.
What were some of the legal?
I started off with Here's the Beef Deli, which was on 3rd in Ingerson. I went down the street on 3rd, and I got Kirkwood Liquors. Then I came back up the street a little bit further, and I got an all-night market, which was supposed to be a 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven wanted 22% of our gross receipts, which I felt was a little high. We can do our own 24-hour market. Just leave it open. So we did that. During this time, a lot of people were taking their cars out to Mustang Factory, Mustang City in South San Francisco, getting restored, and I was able to buy into their shop. And then again, I had a roofing company as well.
Yeah, it's a pretty diverse portfolio.
Yeah, so I would always say, hey man, I took from my community. I did, and I'm not proud of it. I wreaked havoc on it. I brought poison into the community, but at the same time, I didn't own planes and trains and buses and fly that shit in here.
Yeah.
I just became a product of my environment and distribute the product that was affordable to the masses. So I kind of took from the poor, took from the rich, and tried to empower my community. Excuse me.
Well, a lot of big industries have their start like that, right?
Right.
They start with people taking from others or causing some type of harm and eventually establishing a legal business that 100, 200 years later, you don't really blink an eye at, but
right.
That's how it started. But even with these legal businesses, you're making some big ass purchases, right?
Right.
6-figure down payments on mini mansions, right?
Yes.
Multiple luxury cars. What were some? I can't recall off the top of my head. What were some of the other big expenses that came up in your?
I was in Caesar's Palace one day, and guy shows me a Piaget watch, and he says there's only 2 in the world. This one here, and Mike Tyson bought the other one. How much is it? He said like 116,000. And I said, okay, here's 20 grand. I'll send somebody back to pick it up. I sent my cousin back down 3 days later to pick the watch up.
Damn. Well, we talked about the cars as a status symbol, but the other side of the coin is it attracts law enforcement attention.
Sure.
So at a certain point, I know that your case is really interesting. You are the youngest person to be convicted of tax evasion?
I'm the youngest person in the history of the United States of America to ever be charged and convicted of tax evasion.
And how old were you at the time?
25.
So when they came with those charges. They also came with drug charges.
Yes. No, drug charges came later.
So while you were in custody?
While I was in custody, drug charges came later.
Is that because people started informing?
Yeah, people started, their theory was the longer I sat, the more comfortable people got to talk and tell.
So these were people like kind of associated with
Not associated with me indirectly. Like if you were a branch or leaf in my organization, you had your own people. So one of those people dimed you, and then their hopes was that you would dime on me, but it never happened. That person dimed on me based on whatever conversation you and them have had. Not necessarily saying that is true, but that's what happened.
Well, yeah, it's a lot of the book is dedicated to like talking about what happened in your court case.
Yes, because so many people are unwilling to put that in their book.
Oh, yeah.
See, like now, you got this thing going on now. I'm not going to name names, but, we all on social media. We've been hearing about this thing, third-party cooperation. That's big right now, third-party corporation. So we didn't have that in my case. There's no third-party corporation, none of that. That's just new shit y'all got going on now, where, dudes just throwing rocks, just throwing.
Lord forgive me for this trap shit. Sergeant Smack making backflip. Telly Hankin with the action. With the Bible speaking Spanish. Frank Matthews, how I vanish. Poof. Came back like I'm King Tut. Gold BBS is on a beamer. When Fat Cat was 10 queens up. Ball off the profit, not the re-up. Fly like Puerto Rican Jesus. Uptown like I'm Baby May. Just caught a touchdown from the Bay.
We invite you to take a video visit of San Francisco, an enchanting city, one of the most romantic cities in the world. Less than 50 square miles of actual area, yet larger.
This is what has happened since the crackdown began. San Francisco police narcotics officers have made more than 1,000 arrests. They have seized some $160,000 of alleged drug dealers' money. And they have found and confiscated at least 52 illegal guns.
What's up, little partner? What's up with you?
What's going on? Hanging out with my man, JB, and Earl Slim Stevens, the nickname that I gave him.
Big Slim. What is it thought?
Some of you may know the story of Al Capone, where they couldn't get him for prohibition, so they got him for tax evasion. That's the same thing with me. You couldn't get me for crack cocaine, so you got me for tax evasion. I'm the youngest person in the history of the United States to ever be charged with a tax evasion case at the early age of 25. I did 27 years in federal prison. 27 straight, no breaks, no nothing. No coming home, make another kid, go back to the pen. No, 27 straight is what I did. This is a true uncut story on how the cocaine era was ran in San Francisco. Yes, I said it, I'm stamping it. I was the largest cocaine drug dealer in my era.
San Francisco, the cosmopolitan city.
Children and guns, all part of an escalating drug war being fought night and day and in and around San Francisco's housing projects. Open drug warfare that police say is about to blow out of control. Reporter Bob Sirkin joins us now with the latest. Bob?
Bob, San Francisco police tell us they're making 1,000 drug arrests a month in the southeastern part of the city where the drug war rages. But those arrests, say police, aren't even making a dent in the amount of drugs being sold and the violence that drug dealing brings. It's happening in nearly every housing project on over 35 so-called hot street corners in a 7-square-mile area encompassing Potrero Hill, Bayview Hunters Point, and Visitation Valley. Open dealing of crack. Dealers armed with automatic weapons and police scanners selling their stuff night and day. A high-profit drug trade that rival gangs are fighting for control of. Narcotics Sergeant Rene LaProvat says the drug war is on the verge of exploding throughout the city.
The majority of the drug dealers out here have armed themselves against other drug dealers. They're using those arms against each other. They're using them against police responding into this area. They're trying to repel the efforts of Oakland drug dealers and Los Angeles drug dealers to come in here and take over the drug trade.
More than 40% of San Francisco's homicides are drug-related, some gang-style murders. Police have now identified at least 20 drug gangs operating in San Francisco's housing projects. This is a collection of gang members' hats. This one says GT, Geneva Towers Gang, HT, the Hilltop Gang. And all these hats have one thing in common. They all boast of cold cash. Thousands of dollars a week, often earned by children as young as 9 years old, staying out of school, acting as lookouts for drug dealers. Sergeant LaProvat.
They're earning much more money than educated people are doing what they're doing at age 10 years of age. What's the motivation to go to school to get your high school diploma when you're making $500 a day out here selling dope?
And police tell me they believe there is a connection between the drug warfare and the recent rash of attacks against Muni buses and drivers. Police think drug dealers are staging those attacks as a diversionary tactic to take the heat off themselves. But this whole tense situation has put the heat on City Hall and the police department.
It was a time of struggle, the dope era. crack era. Crack was just coming on the scene, and I started selling dimes. I started from nothing. I would get a Baskin-Robbins spoon, and I would take it, and I'd fill it up, flatten it out with a card, take it and put it on the album cover, and split it down the middle. And I would sell each one of them for $10. That's how I got my start. We ran San Francisco in its entirety. Hunters Point.
The crack dealing is especially heavy and violent in the Hunters Point area. Today, while gathering these pictures, cameraman Jerry McEwen and I were attacked by a youth who blew out the rear window of our car. Police aren't sure if the youth hurled a rock or fired a gun.
Lake a month and going through them. When you think of urban black gangsters, you don't think of San Francisco. You think of New York. No, we got gangsters. We got gangsters here in San Francisco. Fillmore Slim, Ronnie Newt, the Ward brothers from Oakland. Me and Daryl Reed from Oakland, Lil D, we rubbed elbows. Felix Mitchell from Oakland. I went down to LA, did deals with Harry O, to sitting at the Grammys with the Jacksons, to owning 7-Elevens, body shops, roofing companies, delicatessen, liquor stores, Rolls Royces, Mercedes-Benz, 15, 20-car fleet, the jewelry, 13-karat single stone diamond rings, $1 million in jewelry. I still got some of it. See, look, I still got some of that stuff, man. This stuff is old, man. This is some of the fruits of my labor right here, man, that I still got. How many dudes you know still got a jewelry after 30 years, man? I still got mine. And the government saw that I wasn't just the average dumb black kid who just bought cars and jewelry. I was trying to find a way to legitimize my money by taking it and sticking it in the businesses. And the government said, hold it, wait a minute, this guy is smarter than the average cat. We have to stop him.
Yo, we back. It's your boy Pop-A-Lot. Mob ties. We on our way to Cali with it. San Francisco. It's our first time around this bitch. We need somebody to point us to Bayview, Hunters Point. We trying to see what's shaking. We gonna tap them everywhere else, but you already know what it is. Sunnydale, Ocean View, Mission District, Fillmore neighborhood. We gonna be passing through. Y'all look for us. We gonna need everybody from San Fran to get in the comment box below. You got one of the biggest in the city to ever do it coming through. And today we are going to be covering none other than James J.B. Beasley Jr. Now, before I get into anything with J.B., I want to talk a little bit about, I want to ask a question really. I want to know what their relationship is like.
Lord forgive me for this trap shit. Sergeant Smack making backflip. Telly Hankin with the action. With the Bible speaking Spanish. Frank Matthews how I vanish. Poof. Came back like I'm King Tut. Gold BBS is on a beamer. When Fat Cat was 10 queens up. Ball off the profit, not the re-up. Fly like Puerto Rican Jesus. Uptown like I'm Baby Maine. Just caught a touchdown from the Bay.
There's a shooting war in Oakland, a deadly battle for turf between drug dealers, police, and citizens. The dealers shoot first and don't even bother to ask questions later. As Tom DeRees reports, the savagery in Oakland makes TV Vice seem almost nice.
For all its reputation, Miami this year has fewer murders for its size than Oakland, and Miami has nowhere near the number of drug-related killings. Oakland is in the midst of a violent battle over control of the drug trade. Police say that drugs have been responsible for 41 murders already this year. Miami police report only 16 drug-related killings so far. The Oakland totals as of this week: 98 homicides, 42% of them drug-related. Last year at this point there had been more murders in Oakland, 106, but only 27% involved drugs. Oakland homicide detectives say the new breed of crack dealer is younger and often armed with an automatic weapon. Lieutenant James Hahn says the dealers are casual about killing to protect their business.
Because of the younger age of these people, he doesn't go out and just break an arm. And now it's just they go out and they commit a murder. There is no attempt to collect on the debt anymore. It's just a punishment for failure to pay.
This funeral last year might have been the beginning of the trouble. Felix Mitchell was king of Oakland's drug trade, and he was killed in prison. 3 other Oakland drug lords also went to jail. The result was a vacuum in the drug business. Lieutenant Hahn.
What we have is an oversupply, so to speak, and easy access to an awful lot of people who want to get into the drug trade for the quick profits.
Oakland police are quick to say that the drugs fought over here are often consumed in the more exclusive parts of the Bay Area. In Oakland, Tom DeVries.
Yo, we back. It's your boy Papa Lot. Mob ties. We on our way to Cali with it. Oakland. Shout out to everybody in Oakland. Need y'all in the comment box below. Rep what part of the city y'all from. But this is going to have a lot, or it's almost going to culminate at the Acorn projects. Anybody from Acorn, y'all get in the comment box. We want to know what's going on around there. We know they tearing down the projects everywhere. Is Acorn still standing? Now, today we are going to be covering a guy by the name of Anthony Flowers, but the neighborhood knows him as Ant. And this story is going to take place pretty much circa the late 80s to the late 90s. And it's almost going to be the aftermath of or a drug vacuum. A lot of times what they say, once a big kingpin is taken off the streets, it's usually a power struggle. And it seems like, or by the media accounts, that's what they labeled this. And they would call this the second Oakland drug war, with the first being the one between Felix Mitchell and Mikey Moore. So that one is well documented. Not sure how many people were wounded or lost their lives between that, but by all accounts, they said that one was not even fueled by anything personal. It was all around the sale, or the lucrative sale of narcotics. That just goes to show you, I never stress enough how dangerous or how much money was involved in the game, especially in the 80s, and then moving into the 90s. So people were willing to die and willing to kill over something that pretty much made them a millionaire in 6 months. You got to imagine. So now, like I said, that is going to culminate in the second drug war in Oakland. And by all accounts, the information is kind of mixed. So on one hand, I saw where they said Anthony Ant Flowers was a member of an organization that was under Little D. And when Little D was arrested, it was an incident at a barbecue in 1989 that led to a split of the groups. And it led to Anthony Ant Flowers joining another organization that we're going to talk on in a little bit, that would go on to clash with the rival Little D organization. And it's pretty deep. So, like, we talked a little bit about Felix Mitchell in the first drug war, and this is going to be pretty much the second one. And I talked about when the power struggle for when a kingpin is convicted. So according to the indictment, they're going to say that, like I said, Little D was indicted, and his organization was headed by another gentleman after he was in jail by the name of Timothy Blewett, who would end up being sentenced to 35 years, but that's going to be down the line. And he is going to be one of the main people that, or actually he's going to be they're going to say he was the second in command when Little D was free. So he was going to be the person that Anthony Flowers was pretty much going up against. And Anthony Flowers had aligned himself with a set of brothers called the Lacey brothers, who were treacherous pretty much in their own right. I seen, and this is just speaking on the Lacey brothers, because some, like I said, the information is jumbled and mixed up. Some places you read, they say they were one faction, and then some places you read, they just allied themselves during this 1989 drug war. That it was a 2-year drug war where they're gonna say 18 members of the two gangs or innocent bystanders were killed in gunfights and drive-by shootings in just that 2 years alone. So it was a bloody time in Oakland in the late 80s going into the 90s. And by all accounts, yeah, the Lacey brothers were almost as treacherous as anybody else that we covered on Mob Ties, because I seen where they had one brother, Emmanuel Lacey, where he was charged with pretty much a shooting, but witness in the case was murdered. That murder was unsolved, and he ended up copping out to a manslaughter, and I think he did 8 years, and they say he was going to be released right around the time of the mid-90s and presumed business, and he would end up being indicted. And I saw the story just take full turns, always like a movie. I saw where they found him and arrested him. He was scalping tickets outside of Colorado Rockies game in Denver. So that should just go to show how, from drug kingpin to his just all levels, pretty much of a legal business, but it just goes to show you the run that it was on. And they gonna say that really that everything came to a culmination really starting in 1988 when the two gangs went to war over the rights to sell drugs in the Acorn housing projects in Oakland. So I can't even imagine the level of violence that was attributed to trying to, because that's the equivalent of having a Carter in New Jack City, Cabrini Green when Chicago was fully running. Like some of these Queensbridge, like some of these projects are blocks long and very, very lucrative, especially when drugs were like flowing through the community like it wasn't anything. It's almost like every person was a potential customer. But the gang war would culminate with Ant Flowers receiving 28 years after he would be indicted on drug charges. So I didn't see where it was like a third drug war in Oakland. I did see where it was a spike in shootings. Anybody in Oakland right now, y'all tap in. One thing about Oakland that I know, based on a lot of people from Oakland speaking, there's no gangs in Oakland. So it's not like these two gangs were fighting. They were more like organizations, but there are no like different sets of gangs in Oakland. So a lot of it, I think, has to be money based if it's not these gangs battling. But anybody in Oakland, y'all tap in, man. Y'all know we trying to find out what's going on out there. It's your boy Popular. Y'all make sure y'all follow me on Instagram, on Twitter. Y'all hit the bell under this video if y'all want to be notified when this real Trill Spill shit is dropping. I'm going to be back. Y'all know what it is. It's the mob. Mob ties.
the 40-yard line.
Lord forgive me for this trap shit. Sergeant Smack making backflip. Telly Hank did with the action. With the vital speaking Spanish. Frank Matthews how I vanished. Poof. Came back like I'm King Tut. Gold BBS is on a beamer. When Fat Cat was 10 queens up. Ball off the profit, not the re-up. Fly like Puerto Rican Jesus. Uptown like I'm Baby Maine. Just caught a touchdown from the bay.
Atlanta police are asking for the public's help in locating a missing person. But Lee and then Turner on the left. Zachary the fullback. Here's Turner on the end and round on the wing. He has a first down and more. 45-50, 45-40, and knocked out of bounds at around the 40-yard line, Jerry. And that's what we're talking about. Turner got outside, and he picked up about 32 yards. 0-3 coming in. They start from their own 40. And they give to Nick Turner, sophomore out of Atlanta. He takes it for a couple off tackle. The Mississippi State offensive lineup. A group that has averaged better than 32 points per game. Justin Jenkins, number 8 there. Got 101 catches for 1,491 yards, 13 touchdowns in his career. He is the go-to guy for this Mississippi State offense. Leads the SEC, averaging 8 catches, 132 yards per game. 7th in the country. Shotgun after a gain of 3. And again on the right side, Turner, and Nick Turner across midfield with a first down.
Yo, we back. It's your boy Popalot. Mob. We on our way to Georgia with it. Y'all know we headed to the finesse capital of the world, Atlanta. Y'all meet us in the city. Now, y'all do your best not to get took off, scammed, robbed, shot, all that shit. Now, if you ever been to the city of Atlanta, if you know, you know. Now, the story I'm about to get into now describes all too well what I'm talking about. A lot of times I do stories about Atlanta and I mention it being the finesse capital of the world. And I get a lot of people in the comment box talking about, oh, what about LA? What about New York? What about Chicago? Yes, I agree that there's a high number of scammers and finessers in those cities, but it is my belief that the best and the most elite scammers from those cities go to Atlanta because that's the headquarters. The fuck? Now, today, I'm going to be bringing you the story of a standout football athlete that made several decisions in his life that would ultimately lead him down a path of destruction. Now, the young man I'm talking about is going to be a guy by the name of Nick Turner. Now, before I get started, anybody from the city of Atlanta or that's familiar with Nick Turner or this case, definitely we need y'all in the comment box. But for those of you guys not familiar, Nick Turner was a standout running back for Booker T. Washington High School. He was actually named a Parade All-American, which is probably one of the highest prestiges that you can get. And based on my research, I saw where he was coming out of school in 2002, he would go on to commit to Mississippi State, where he would be ranked 12th amongst running backs behind guys like Jarius Norwood and Maurice Claret, if you could believe that. Now, doing my research on his stats, looks like when he first arrived at Mississippi State in 2002, it doesn't look like he got much time on the field, where he only had 8 carries for 31 yards. But it really wouldn't be long before he would make an impact for the team, because the very next year in 2003, he would go on to lead them in rushing, where he had 123 attempts for 696 yards. And that went for an average of 5.7 yards per carry. He also scored 7 touchdowns. So anybody familiar with football or averages, that would essentially tell him that he was on his way to what would look like a productive career for the Bulldogs. But like a lot of youth from the inner city, trouble just happened to follow him. And it didn't help that his coach was probably one of the most stern coaches, who was a guy by the name of Sylvester Croom. And just to test my sports knowledge, he was, if I'm not mistaken, the first black coach in the SEC, which is a huge deal because the SEC is like really the NFL junior. So to be a coach in that league is a big deal. And in 2005, Nick Turner would be dismissed from the team before spring drills even kicked off after he failed to attend class, along with other violations, which would lead Sylvester Croom to say about Nick Turner, he has not met the expectation level we have for a Mississippi State football playing student athlete. Now, some media reports online also say that he might have been kicked out because he was arrested for passing counterfeit bills in a nightclub as well. But when you was as talented as Nick Turner was, and when I say talented, y'all really just don't understand. So in his senior year, he would go on to rush for 1,700 yards, and he missed 4 games. He would start from his first day on the field at Booker T. Washington, and he would go on to amass 11,000 all-purpose yards before his career was done. So, of course, he's going to have other opportunities. And I seen in 2005 where he would take his talent to Murray State. I couldn't see where he got on the field, so I would presume this to be the end of his football career. So by all accounts, by that time, it looked like it was back to the city of Atlanta for Nick Turner. And it wouldn't be 3 years, I saw, from when he was back home to where on March 8th, 2008, he would end up being charged with the murder of a guy by the name of Damon Brodus and what police would call a drug deal gone bad. They didn't really release many details as far as that was concerned, but just researching the case, I'm not sure if it was a situation where he beat it, the charges were dropped, or he even served any time for that charge. But by all accounts, Nick Turner seemed like he was in the game. Now, I'm sure at this time, Nick Turner had to be reflecting at the opportunity that he had, that he probably messed up. And to be honest, the next 5 years from when he left the Murray State football team, it was very, very tragic because not only was he charged with that murder that we just spoke of, on September 1st, 2010, a guy by the name of Marcus Garner, who was the author for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, would go on to write, Nick Turner was an electrifying football player and a respectable young man. However, Turner's penchant for making bad choices has been blamed for his disappearance by the people closest to him, leading them to fear the worst. In an article titled Football Standout Missing, Worse is Feared, they would explain how Nick Turner would go missing one late Saturday night in September of 2010. It would be a week later on September 8th when the same media outlet, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, would publish an article written by Rhonda Cook titled Football Star Was Shopping for Pot When He Was Shot. Now, in that article, they would say former football star Nick Turner and a friend of his made a fatal mistake when they went to a hard-to-find parking lot in Southwest Atlanta to buy weed from people neither of the two knew. Now, Lieutenant Paul Garucci, who was commander of the Atlanta Police Homicide Unit at the time, would go on to say that we have not located the victim, so this case is being worked as a missing person. Going on to say that being that the police department didn't have a body, they could not work this case as a homicide, but none of his family members had heard from him. Now, it would be days later when more details would emerge about Nick Turner's disappearance, and a friend of his would describe that they went to a hard-to-find parking lot in Southwest Atlanta to buy weed from a man from New Orleans known only as Cutter. Now, police will go on to say that it was between 8 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. when Nick Turner and that friend got to the side of the rear of the warehouse on Murphy Avenue that houses storage spaces, a tire store, and an artist studio. They would go on to say that the unidentified friend that was with Turner stated that Nick Turner approached somebody who was supposedly selling the weed, shots were fired, and Nick Turner was hit multiple times. Now, this is a really, really weird case because they're going to say that police were alerted when one of Turner's relatives flagged down a cruiser and they have found the AK-47 and some spent shells from a handgun. Now, crime scene technicians would recover a small drop of blood, but search dogs would not be able to pick up the scent from Nick Turner. Police helicopters equipped to spot heat from body found nothing as well. Now, Nick Turner's mother would go on to say that her son's connection to drug dealing is probably the reason he disappeared. And she would go on to say that she found a list of goals in a wallet that was given to her by one of his friends. And on that list was he wanted to do things right. And that was reported on October 29th of 2010. And based on my research, there still is no signs of Nick Turner. So anybody in the game, please know what y'all doing. And I'm going to say this again. Mob ties is education and not glorification. A lot of people would say, oh, we're glorifying crime and we're doing this and that. That's going to be a big negative. I'm solely doing this for my guys in the game. Either it's going to teach you a lesson or you're going to take it to the max, whatever you're going to do with it. But we not in the business of knocking hustles over here. But y'all know what it is with me. Y'all make sure y'all follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, POP_A_LOT. Now, anytime I do these sports episodes, I try to ask, is this one of the worst downfalls or tragedies in sports history? And I always get people flooding the comment box. We talk about Victor Page. We talk about Maurice Claret. We talk about Mike Tyson. We talk about Michael Vick. It's just so many people that we can name. If y'all have anybody that I didn't mention or y'all think, y'all get in the comment box. Y'all make sure y'all hit that red subscribe button right under this video so y'all know when this real, trill, spill shit is dropping. And definitely get in the comment box. Let me know what stories we need to cover, what gangsters we miss, what hoods we haven't been to, all of that. And y'all already know how y'all can get at me. Y'all tweet me, tag me, text me, mention me, email me, CC me, stop me in the streets, however y'all want to handle it. It's your boy Pop, Mob,